Hello. I just thought I would come on while I have a cup of tea here and a cigarette. And one of the reasons I came on is a way back a number of weeks ago. Somebody came into the comments and you know was sort of putting through the idea of direct radio voice using a scanned radio but removing the antenna and putting the radio into a Faraday cage. You know, when comments like that come in, that is sort of thinking outside the box. And you know, with radios, you've got the scan method and you've got the direct radio voices. Now, I recently seen a stream where they were not very... You're either into IDC or you're not. But the point was made that, you know, if you want to do communication, no human voices should be coming through the radio, no radio stations, and remove the aerial and make sure there's no radio coming in. You know, that is, you know, that is a method, and that is a method, you know, that was being used for many years, you know, until this new method came in, you know, from Frank Sumption, the scan radio method, with, you know, the human voices. Now there is, you know, ITC researchers out there. Annabella Cardoso is one of them, who wholeheartedly believes that the best and most credible communication is direct radio voices and the EVPs. The EVPs, you know, they use static from the radio for EVPs. Now, I've got great respect for Annabella Cardoso, but I also have great respect for Frank Sumption. And people often question the Frank Sumption method, the scanned radio method. And the reason why we continue to use it nowadays is because when you do recording sessions a lot, you do get direct answers to questions a lot. You know, obviously the more sessions you do, the more answers you're going to get. And it's these amount of hits that we get that proves to us that the Frank Sumption method works. You know, on the other hand, you have Annabella Cardoso, whose basic belief is you should not have human voices at all. You know, static from the radio for the direct radio voices and the EVPs. Now, on removing antennas, the thing about removing antennas is you don't have to remove an antenna. A lot of the direct radio voices, you use a shortwave band where radio traffic is at its lowest. The other way of sort of being safe in the frequency that you're in is to look up your country's government emergency frequency. That frequency is left for government emergencies. It is against the law to operate on that frequency. So if you use that frequency for the direct radio voices or the EVPs, you're not going to get radio. So removing the antenna, you don't need to do that. But back when I was 16, I don't know much about electronics, but it was a car radio that I used with a bit of assistance from my science teacher, who was big into the paranormal. We got chatting after class, and we done some recordings, and we done some direct radio voice work. We done some EVP work with the reel to reel and the wire and ordinary tape decks, and you put them into these Faraday tents kind of thing, to just 100% make sure that no radio frequencies will interrupt the equipment. With the radios, it was the same. Now the car radio, once you pulled out the antenna, you got absolutely nothing. But I took the radio. I got the car radio, which was an old turn radio, car radio with the turn dial on it, and I made a little box, and I covered it in leatherette, and I had a little speaker and that, and it looked like a little amplifier and that. And I took it into the teacher, and the teacher removed a coil and some sort of receiver. I'm not good with electronics, but he done something like that to make sure 100% that no broadcast will come in, and that is the way it was done a long time ago, and people still do it today, and I still do it from time to time, the other thing about it is, the people that are doing the sessions are called an operator for a reason. You have to be there. If you turn on a radio and leave the room, you have to ask yourself, what are you communicating? What is the communicators supposed to communicate with? Now, you could argue that maybe two communicators could communicate with each other and have a conversation in your absence, but in general, it is best that the operator is there, and as well as that, you want to ask questions in order to get some answers, kind of thing. Way back, Marcello Bacci, used to go to the town hall with his big radio, and sometimes Marcello Bacci was tested. He had a big valve radio, and they took the valves out, and it still worked. And in fact, I've heard stories of Marcello Bacci and Annabella Cardoso, where there was no power going into the radio, yet there was communication. I yet to have to hear it from her, and it's possibly in one of my books, but there has been a number of cases where communication came through on a radio with no power in it, But with people like Marcello Bacci, he used to bring the radio to the town hall where he lived, and people that had lost loved ones used to come, and they say that it was the voice of their loved ones come through, and communicated with them. Now, the one thing that he didn't do was, come to the night and he can't be bothered, or he's too tired, and just arrived at the hall and said, "Listen, here's the radio. I'm back. I'm going back home. I'm not feeling that well." That gives us information that the operator is very important in that situation. You know, um, I have seen somebody turn on the radio in the room and leave, and is running the radio for a couple of hours, and then says, it's 2 hours in or whatever, and there's no ghosties coming through or no spirits coming through. The communication happens over time. You have to keep doing it, and you only have to spend about 20 minutes a day doing it. As Annabella Cardoso says, try find the same time every day. The same frequency, the same time, possibly the same place as well if you can. But if you can't do that, that's okay. But try to do 20 minutes a day, and eventually, it'll come. With the scan method, it was the same. It's the same thing. You have a lot of people that would say that the spirit box or the ghost box doesn't work. I have seen videos on YouTube where somebody unboxes a PSP-7, which I think is one of the I've grown. I hated it before I bought it, and then I had to buy it to find out what it was like. And now I'm kind of growing to hate it. There's better radios out there. The PSP-7, the PSP-11, S-Box, three of my least favourite radios for spur communication. There's better stuff out there. But I'm going back to the videos. I seen a video where somebody unboxed a PSP-7. Said they never used it before, so let's have a go. He turns it on, he presses the scan, he's running it for a couple of minutes, and then he says, "There's my proof. The spirit box doesn't work. All I'm hearing is static and bits of radio. That is it. The spirit box doesn't work." That's not the way spirit communication works. In fact, my first radio, I'm ashamed to say, it was a PSP-11, a really extremely noisy box. Did I get communication with it? I did. But my first piece of communication with the scan method on a PSP-11 took almost 4 weeks. 20 minutes of a day, and coming towards the 4 weeks, I was about to say that the scan method doesn't work when I got my first responses, and it started increasing from then on in. The thing about it too is keep up your sessions. There's a theory out there that connection's very important, and I'm not saying I have a connection. I'm still at the very beginning of this, even though I've been doing it a while. But since lockdown, I've been doing sessions every day, sometimes 2 or 3 sessions, you know, and I'm still learning to communicate properly, if you know what I mean. I'm still sort of learning to have that conversation flow. Um, you know, to wholeheartedly say that you're communicating with spirits. Yes, often they say they're spirits and ghosts, but but because it's not proven, we call them communicators, and that's why we call them communicators. We don't label them, spirits of the afterlife. Um, there's been a lot of evidence from older ITC researchers that yes, it is the afterlife. It is, spirits of people that passed, and that is one of the biggest beliefs in all of this. But is there other communicators? There's evidence to say that there is. You know, ITC research have questioned in the line of, how do they communicate? Do they communicate with a physical device, a physical communication device? Um, and there has been answers yes. Um, but with the communication, you have to one session a month sort of isn't going to 100% cut it, because the more sessions you do, the more of a portfolio of information you're going to gather, and to get that picture together, you have to sort of put all the information together and see what way it sort of fits, in order to get some sort of an idea of the landscape of the area of communication that goes on. Because every time you turn the radio on, certainly for me, you turn the radio on and I ask, where are you? I've often asked, are you in this world or another world? And they say this world, So, but at the same time, fundamental questions don't be answered, and what happens is you ask those fundamental questions and sometimes the communication just dies. It's gone. Sometimes they say they can't tell you that, or it's a secret. I've asked a number of times, is there someone in charge? They say yes. They'll say David, they'll say Philip. So that picture is starting to sort of come together, but it just takes a long time to sort of get more information. And there's people who've been doing this for years, and they have a better sort of understanding than I do. But going back to different forms of radio communication, certainly direct radio voice is good. Does it contain all the frequencies for communication? For me, it's difficult. It's a difficult one, because it is more difficult. Um, it seems to be more. It seems to be more forthcoming with the scan method. But then people ask you, when you ask a question and you get a direct answer, how do you know it's not potluck? Well, if I ask, can you say my name's Sam? And I get that reply, which I have a number of times, how can I hit potluck that many times, if you know what I mean? And over time, when you you have to train your ears to it. Over time, there's a certain tone that is different than the radio tones that's coming in from the radio, and that slight different tone, when it comes through and you ask a question, you get it, and when you get a direct answer, that direct answer is usually in a sort of a different tone or a different rhythm than the radio scan. When I turn on a radio and it scans, you listen for the rhythm, then you get into the questions. And next thing, if you're getting some sort of response, that rhythm breaks. But I thought I would just briefly sort of talk about the difference between the scan method and the direct radio voices, and who is right and who is wrong. It's a choice. If you want to do your direct radio voices and you believe that there shouldn't be any human voices, that's a personal choice. That is a personal choice. Some people would say that, you're destroying your credibility by having human voices and radio snippets. But the thing is, the radio snippets, the Frank Sumption method is a method. It's a method that's been investigated. It's been investigated since it's been discovered. And that's what's going on. So, who's right and who's wrong? Nobody's right and nobody's wrong. Because we haven't achieved to and fro communication like we would be communicating with another human being. It's not that simple. There's a long way to go. The big question is, will it still be radio? I don't know. But that is, there's the ITC community, and there's an ITC community that believe in static and no radio, using a shortwave on a government station or on a frequency where there's definitely no radio. And if you can't get a government station, just use a frequency that there is nothing on it and just run it for a while until you are sure that nothing is coming through. You do not need to remove the antenna of your radio. And in fact, if you just snap the antenna off, part of that antenna still remains in the radio. And that part of the antenna inside the radio becomes the antenna. Now you'll get less radio, but there isn't much difference in a telescopic aerial up or down, and it's snapped off, because there's still going to be a piece of the antenna that's going to remain in the radio. There was this method called the hack method for the PSP7, which disconnecting the antenna. I had a problem with that, because people say, well, if you disconnect the antenna, you're not going to get radio voice coming through. But the thing is, you are, because when you remove the wire that's connecting to the bottom of the antenna, the telescopic antenna inside the PSP7, if you remove that wire from the antenna, the wire itself becomes the antenna. Yes, you will have less radio coming in, but you'll still get radio, you know. Um, on the FM frequency, on the AM frequency, you've got this coil, and it's a precise coil. It has to have a certain amount of turns and a certain length. It's quite precise, and to cut out the AM frequency, that has to be cut. But a lot of people, don't bother cutting that because they want to still use the AM the way it is, and use the FM with no radio. But the thing is, it goes further than just removing the antenna, because once you remove the antenna, the little piece of wire that's coming from the circuit board sort of becomes the antenna in a way. It's a weaker antenna, but an antenna all the same. And if you have a strong local signal, you still pick it up, you know. But going back to the argument, there's no wrong or right way. They're both methods in their own right, you know. And certainly I wouldn't discourage anybody from doing direct radio voice. And in fact, I think direct radio voice is very, very interesting because, you don't have any radio, and you've got more of a clarification that, if you get an answer to your question through a shortwave band with no radio coming in, it is it better? I don't know. Is it better? It sort of stands out as a lot less debunkable because of the fact that pareidolia is a problem with the scan method. Yes, it is. But it all goes back to training your ear to the tones, the breaking of the rhythms of the scan, and the length of time it takes to say that response. And that I mean is when your radio is scanning, you have this little click, this click in the scan. Sometimes when a word with a number of syllables come through, sometimes it's called fragmented communication, where the syllables are broken up and it's two or three different voices coming through on that. And that's called fragmented communication. And sometimes the communication goes over a number of different frequencies in the scan, But I just thought I would come on and just talk about the difference between the two and which better and which is worse. And this argument has gone on for a long, long time between, which is good, which is bad. A lot of the older right ITC researchers, as I say, think that you're throwing away your credibility by using radio with human voices in it. But the reason why they're doing it is because it works. The results speak for themselves over time, not immediate, over time. But what is the way forward in this? Certainly a lot of people say about rather than linear sweep, which is the start at the beginning of the frequency on the radio to the end, and it loops around. It keeps going. It goes from the lowest to the highest. Um, and the random sweep, um, my random sweep spur box has a little tiny antenna inside, and it's triggered by electromagnetic fields in the air, and it sends a voltage to the tuner, and it sort of randomly picks a frequency on the radio. The random frequency is pretty good. You have other people too that have perfected a board, or a reverse audio board, which reverses live radio. And you have people like Rob Hernandez who made my RTC box, and he has been messing around with the speed, and the speed has to be a certain speed. Because if you go too slow or you go too fast, he he he, he figured out what was the sweet spot, you know what I mean, and he's got that sweet spot, and it's quicker than I would normally scan with on my boxes, But when it comes to research, it's good to think outside the box and think in different ways. Somebody even suggested to me of getting a record player and using the audio from a record while I'm sort of scratching it and turning it backwards and stuff. Now that's thinking outside the box, you know what I mean? Could it work? Nobody knows until they try, I've never heard of somebody doing that, but sometimes the comments have some really gold ideas, and some people feel, I feel silly saying this, but what have we done? Don't be silly. Don't feel silly. If you have an idea, no matter how off the wall it is, sometimes it can make perfect sense, because we're still trying to make perfect sense of everything when it regard to the paranormal, in regard to spirit communication. So don't be embarrassed to ask really what's in your head. No matter how bizarre you think that the idea is, it could be a fantastic idea. Maybe it's not, but maybe it is. And sometimes, those ideas, they're outside the box, and people are afraid to share. But that's how ideas and that's how progress is made. So, if you want to share ideas, don't be afraid to do that, because that's how we move forward. That's how we, in order to try and make any understanding of the paranormal, which is not a cut, it's not a black and white thing. There's no list of do's and don'ts. Well, there is do's and don'ts on a moral aspect or whatever, but when it comes to the paranormal, there's still a lot of sort of grey areas where, in fact, most of it is. So, thinking outside the box is a good way of making progress. Will it, will that idea bear fruit? Maybe or maybe not, But you don't know until you share it, until you try it out for yourself. Don't be afraid to do that. People are doing smoke ITC, other people are saying, oh, it's pareidolia and that. But a lot of people that do the criticism don't try it. Or don't, people that criticise the spirit box, criticise the radio, very often the ones that haven't tried it. And that's why I brought up the point of this video where some guy buys a spirit box, he orders it, it arrives, he takes it out of the box, he turns it on, a couple of minutes later he says, this is just nonsense, it's just radio. Spirit box, radio, it's not a phone. It's not, you don't use it like a phone. You don't ask questions and get immediate answers. You know? And you still have that theory around the operator is important, the connection with the operator is important. Some say that the communicators communicate to us through our energy, through our mind, or through our brain. You know, it's stuff that can't be sort of proved by science, but a lot of ITC researchers says, you know, very often when they are at the radio and they're communicating, asking questions and talking, that's when they get the results. If they walk away and leave the radio on, leave a camera on, hop into their car and go off, very often they get nothing. A lot of the time they get nothing. I've done it myself. Not to say that it wouldn't happen, because I've actually had my own voice come through a radio when I was about 5 miles away. But in general, a lot of people say the operator is very, very important. So turning on a radio and leaving it on and then just leaving, a lot of results, and they're not as good. Certainly not as good as sitting there at the radio, asking the questions, trying to make that communication. You know, and making that communication is important. But I'm going to finish my tea here, and I'll see you in the next one. I thought I would just do a video of me talking rather than doing spirit boxes all the time, because a lot of the time I have uploads and very often it's just spirit boxes. So I just thought I would talk tonight while I'm having my cup of tea. And my dog is begging for a treat now, so I better go. I'll see you in another video, folks.